how do we explain when you go to a skincare launch, for example, and it's really high tech, loads of technology, loads of research, how do we explain that to the person that is just looking at it on a shelf? There was so much pressure on making sure I reached the top of that career tree that I didn't get to enjoy the journey in the same way that I do now.
Lauren, welcome to this podcast.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. And the thing is, for anyone that's listening, you were part of my copywriter in my very first series. And I wanted you on that one, and I'm so glad I've got you now.
I get the insight. I get to actually listen to it on the day live and sort of get to experience the emotions, the highs, the lows, and goes on the journey with everyone that you've had on, because you've had some amazing people on.
Thank you. I mean, for everyone that's listening, my memories of you, obviously, how I met you was by accident, which I didn't know until
I have it
later.
It's so vivid in my mind, in that old building in where the Sun and the News of the World used to be, behind the Wapping Wall. And I mean, it was terrible. It was the opposite of glamour, wasn't it? And people used to think, oh, you've got these glamorous jobs, but this was in an old factory building behind a really awful wall. And you came upstairs and you were meant to meet my fashion director, who was too busy to meet you, and she sent me out. And I was a fashion assistant at the time, and I was so embarrassed. I was like, oh God, I'm so sorry, but I'll come and look at your book. And I remember opening your book, and it was just like nothing I'd seen before. Just had a realization of the book. No one would ever do that now, would they? But you actually have a physical book where we would go through people's work, look at pictures, look at cut-ins. I remember there being like some Polaroids, really these full bleed gorgeous pictures, and I remember thinking, oh God, when I'm shooting, I'm gonna book Lan. She's going to be part of my team when I'm shooting. And at the time, although I worked in fashion, I really wanted to move over to beauty. And when I was working on shoots, I was always obsessed with what the makeup artist was doing. I'd always spend hours in there. I realised actually afterwards that I'd always been obsessed with beauty and products. I don't think I saw that as a natural career. When I went to university to study journalism, I thought I was going to be war reporting. I thought I was going to be like Kate Adie, out on the field reporting back, all these untruths. And it never really went like that for me. I did my first ever court reporting for a local newspaper, absolutely hated it. And I was like, no, I'm going to go and work for a women's magazine. But I never really saw beauty as an industry to go into. I think in particular, probably around this point, it was fashion's ugly younger sister. The fashion team were the main team. Beauty was always a bit of a side note. It wasn't really important. Like, they were sort of pushed aside, weren't they?
Yeah, and I think the reason for that was because we didn't really have much social media. It wasn't a big thing then to see beauty. And in the fashion industry, or as a makeup artist, you didn't really look at any other industry than fashion. So everybody just wanted to get published. Everybody wanted to cover. Everyone wanted to do editorial. And,
But it was never a beauty lead.
No,
it was always,
never.
The makeup came afterwards. This was the shoot. This was the styling. This was the idea. This was the mood board. And then this was the makeup. Hair, actually, I think sometimes had a bit more. You sort of knew that. I remember my fashion director, she always loved hair. She always had sort of tears for hair. But I don't really remember her having a sort of tears for makeup, to be quite honest. As well, at that point, it was very minimal. That was the makeup trend. It was really, really minimal, because it was sort of that, the 2000s of like Kate Moss and people like that. Maybe a smudgy eye or a lip, but there was nothing. There wasn't all of these amazing makeup looks that we were using in the magazine. So when I sort of wanted to make the change, everyone thought it was a bit strange. Why would you want to move over to beauty when you could go up the ranks in fashion? But I just had this feel for it, because, as I say, I've always been obsessed with products. I used to spend all my money on products. I have loads of like really distinct memories of like buying products, what they meant to me, saving up money. I always liked them more than fashion.
But then, so tell me, when you actually moved to the beauty side, What was your first sort of point of call? Like, how did you go about
I moved over
picking?
shooting, actually, because obviously where I'd assisted a stylist, and Tracy, the fashion director at Fabulous, was amazing. And oh my God, I mean, I did not have that background. I don't particularly have that natural creativity, but was so amazing. She's such like a visual leader that I learned from her. And I've always been a very good learner. Like, I would say that for me, it's never been a natural talent, whether that was the writing or the styling or anything that's come since then. It's always been the grafting.
Yeah.
I put in the hours, I learn, I take it in, I absorb it. So I moved over and started shooting because they were like, well, you've assisted the fashion director, so you must have a visual eye. You can go off shoot the beauty. And I went off and started shooting beauty. And I was shooting beauty before I even was writing. So that's how I moved over. And I think probably at that point is when I probably got in contact with you. But the other thing that I've always been very good at is not delegating, but understanding people's skills. So I knew I didn't have I didn't have that natural visual thing. So I was like, but I saw somebody's book that did. And that's how I got you involved. And that's why I think when we did shoot and when we shot, or with other hairdressers and with photographers, I let the team do their work, because I sort of always, we talk about imposter syndrome, but I always felt a little bit like the imposter. I hadn't come from an art background. I didn't have a natural styling flair. You found me most of the time in jeans, trainers and a T-shirt, which you still do, right? I still don't get that much joy out of clothes. So I thought I always just hid behind a really good team. And I think that is how I progressed so quickly and so well, actually, because I really trusted the people that I worked with.
But also you were such a doer. You knew exactly what you wanted. So that was quite clever, because I know from an artist's point of view and hearing other clients, when they book people, it's based on what you show and what you showcase. So it's so important what you do put out. People are like, don't worry, just put out whatever you want. But actually, when it comes to clients and beauty heads, like booking artists, you go by what's in their book, don't you?
Totally. Yeah, 100%. I think obviously I've come pre-social media. We didn't have social media. So it was also personality. If I thought I could bounce off somebody, because I think that's always been really important for me. I think I'm really big on collaboration. I'm really big on teamwork. Even my 3-year-old, you say to him, what makes us the best? And he goes, teamwork makes the dream work. Because I'm very much about that team. And, when we went on trips, I made sure my team felt like superstars, right? Because I always thought that was the best way of getting the best out of them. Treat them well, let them have a good time. Don't feel like they're being micromanaged, and then I got the best out of them, which then made me look so good. Yeah.
But I mean, you used to always give the best brief, but you'd always say, well, do what you like, and that freedom was brilliant. No,
I always have ideas, and I always had ideas, and I was always surprised myself when they came about. I was very good at finding locations, sort of the business side of it, organising shoots on budget, finding these amazing houses or random places in Miami. Do you remember when we went to Miami and we walked past that house? I was like, we need to shoot there. It's like, okay, we're going to do that. That was always my skill. It was, because I suppose my skill has always been a communicator. So I knew how to talk to these people and get them to do what I wanted.
I mean, and I think, when you had your article, just going back to the bit where you did Lauren Does, and it's I mean, I think, that was the beginning era of the selfie era, because you put yourself in everybody else's shoes. And that's what I love, because I think at that time I knew what I was projecting, giving out for beauty ideas or makeup ideas. But then you come along and then ask a question. I'm like, oh, actually. And then I had to think about, how do I process that? So you were very good at seeing it from the consumer, or sharing the right knowledge.
What I've seen my skill. My skill has always been, how do we get backstage to front, right? How do we explain when you go to a skincare launch, for example, and it's really high tech, loads of technology, loads of resets? How do we explain that to the person that is just looking at it on a shelf, that hasn't got someone there to explain it to them? And I think that's where Lauren Does came in, because, which is how I pitched it, basically. It was like, let's show people what these looks look like on a real person, right? It wasn't, I don't know, I never really thought about it being my face. And when we worked on the shoots, I'd edit those pictures as if it was someone else. I don't look at those pictures. I never cared if they were good, bad. I didn't care if I looked ugly. It wasn't about that. It was about showing somebody the looks and how they could translate into everyday life. And sometimes they worked and sometimes they looked ridiculous, which was brilliant. I saw, Kendall Jenner at the Met Ball with her bleached eyebrows. Oh, babes, we did that 10 years ago, right? Because that was on all the catwalks. So I was like, well, actually, can somebody who's not a supermodel wear this in real life? The answer is categorically no. Like, do not try it, especially if you've got dark hair. But that was the fun side of it. And I think with social media, when we were trying things, that's how it started. That's how it started with the how-tos. Where it's gone now has been completely different. But it started with people trying out products, people going to the shops, buying them, trying them on themselves, seeing if they worked. And that's where people fell in love with that side of social media, because it felt real, which was exactly what we were doing with Lauren Does. It's just funny that it just hasn't continued on that. And I think that was where with me, I felt Lauren Does had also run its course. Yeah. And I also didn't want to, I was very comfortable with it being inside a magazine and as part of my job. I wasn't as comfortable with it being me.
Yeah, I did notice that, because I was like, oh my God, one of the best beauty writers. I mean, I relate to, and I know, like, anytime I read any of your status on anything, political views, and you're fighting for somebody or something, it's just so relatable. And I absolutely love reading everything that you do. Why do you think that is?
I'm honest. I'm such an oversharer. I mean, to the point where it's a little bit chronic. I've actually tried to hone it in the last year.
Do you get in trouble for it?
No, do you know what? I've never got in trouble. And I've always been quite controversial, and I've said things, and I really will do. And there's things that I've said in the past that I would never say now. And I learn, and I'm open to it. That's what I said. I love learning. I'm actually the biggest loser ever. Most nights you will find me Googling some ridiculous subject, and to the point where I have literally, like, the neurosis is out of control. But I love it. I just love information. I love finding out things about people. I like finding out things about different subjects. And I think that comes across when I write.
And I think that's why you've an answer for absolutely everything, from IP law to whatever. And if you don't know, you'll come back, one sec. Lauren Does.
Yeah. I go and research it. Like, I might sound clever, but it's because I've read a load of things that other people have done. Like, I don't like to be wrong. I really don't like to be wrong. I really don't like to have misinformation. So I'll go back and read it until I don't. And I think I've approached everything in that way. And the only problem I've had is then when something doesn't align with me, I can cut it off quite quickly. Yeah. Which has good and bad. I tend to cut things off when they no longer align with me.
Even if they're really good opportunities,
I cut them.
Cut them off.
Yeah, I think it's just because I've probably researched them to the point of no return, or something.
I mean, that's something you have, which is integrity, and that's.
Oh yeah, I'd rather die by my word than sort of
Yeah, same. I think that's why we get on so well.
Oh yeah.
But I mean, as from what you've done, as an entrepreneur as well, as I see you as this sort of person, because you do a bit of everything. You say you don't want to do marketing or social stuff, but you actually are very good at everything.
Well, it's funny because somebody said to me recently, like, how do you always wear these different hats? And I was like, well, I don't. I was in the job for 12 years. I was beauty editor. Well, I was beauty editor for 8 years, but at the magazine for 12 years. And then I realised, actually, hang on, when I started at the magazine, I was running a cheerleading group on the side. And I started that when I was 18 years old. And I have always, and then I'm like, oh, hang on, I've always done loads of different things. It's always been something, I'll do this and I'll also do that and I'll help them out with this.
But you've also excelled on every single part, because when you say, just a cheerleading group, and then I look at the video, I'm like, holy shit, this is the cheerleading squad. And then you just go and do your move, and I'm like, wow, everything you've done has.
I have a limitless, I would say my biggest asset has always been my limitless sort of mindset. I never buy, when people say like that's too good to be true or you can't achieve that, my answer is why? Like I genuinely don't know why. Like I think obviously that was what happened during the pandemic when you know, I set up the charity and I remember people saying to people, how are you going to do this? And I was like, does it matter to you? I'll work it out, thank you very much. And I did. Yeah,
because I remember you telling me about this charity. And I was like, okay, just go for it and then tell me what you need. And then, you know, what did you do? I mean, set up a whole charity. I mean, like when I look back on it now, it's crazy. It's actually crazy because that literally started. I was watching the news in bed. It was 10 o'clock at night, March the 25th. So 2020. So, you know, right at the start of the pandemic, we all thought we were going to die, didn't we? I mean, let's face it, we had no idea what was going on. And there was this thing about nurses needing hand cream. And I was like, what? Right. And I remember sitting there in bed thinking, now bearing in mind, I'd only just left the magazine to have my second child, but I knew the amount of samples that are in the beauty industry. I knew how many brands, you know, what brands had. And I was like, hang on, there'll be boxes of hand cream sitting in PR's offices or sitting in warehouse or sitting in shops. Somebody surely can get these hand creams to nurses who are out there, you know, fighting for us. And then I realised that person would be me. So I was like, fine, I'll do it then. No one else can do it, I'll do it. And I literally sent an email to my contact list, which to be fair was a pretty extensive contact list. I think it was about 300 PRs. But the response was unbelievable. And within the first few days, I had 25,000 products donated. Within 3 weeks, it was 50,000. By the end, we had over 350,000 products donated. And I mean, we were able to donate goodie bags to it. How it sort of progresses. We went from doing hand creams to I suddenly got, actually it was one brand, they said, oh, we've got hair masks. Can we do anything with a hair mask? And I was like, actually, these people are, you know, risking everything. They're working long hours while we're sitting at home. I wanted to give them what I believe is the most important thing, the most powerful thing with the beauty industry. I wanted to give them that moment for them. So I was like, actually, I'm going to send another email. And this time I'm going to ask for any beauty products because I'm going to make them goodie bags. Because when I was at the magazine, I used to, if somebody was going through a breakup or illness or anything, I would make them up a goodie bag, right? And I would really curate these amazing goodie bags. And I had so much joy giving them to people. And I know how much joy they gave to people, especially people in really terrible situations. I mean, I had a friend whose mum was going through cancer treatment and you know, she was so thankful to have these products because her hair had started falling out, her skin had got dry. So I was like, I'm going to make goodie bags and I'm going to send them out to as many people as I possibly can. And it started with me physically delivering them, you know, in boxes. And then I had so much help. Like my local community was ridiculous. And we had over 125 volunteers. We had 2 warehouses that was running. Incredible. We had vans going left, right and centre. I mean, I looked at a text message I sent the other day where we distributed 470 goodie bags to over 7 hospitals in London on one day. And then Fabulous came back to me and we joined with them. And then they got UPS involved and it went nationwide, which is how it managed to go to everywhere else. But it was such a privilege to be able to be in that position to do it. Which I think is the bit that people don't always get. Like, I knew that those individuals, whether they were the cleaner, that I never bothered, I never cared who was the person that got in touch with me. It was because it actually didn't matter. Yeah. Right? If somebody felt that they needed that goodie bag, I always wanted to provide them with one. Does that make any sense? It didn't matter to me. And actually, the feedback that I got from my volunteers was it saved them as well. It stopped boredom. I had people say to me, thank God we're making these goodie bags because our marriage wouldn't survive this. You know, it was such a sort of 360 organisation. Well, that beauty, that what people think is frivolous and not important, but it did it. But you created a job for so many people and yourself. Kept me busy, kept me out of trouble for 3 months. Yeah, and I remember listening to all your rants and raves about government as well. So you were very prolific as well in like bringing just a lot of things to the forefront. I felt like a lot of issues, which was amazing. You know, and I feel like, you know, you've changed a lot of people's mindsets. You don't know it, but like your stories and everything that you put out there, I mean, you will often say it yourself, you know, you put something out and then you have so much help, you know, so that must be a testament, you know, to how good you are.
Yeah, I think as well, I've always had that, be nice to everybody. You never know where they're going or where they've been.
Yeah.
Right. So that is nice at the top, the bottom, because you know, titles and positions don't speak history. So I had people that I'd met in the industry who were assistants, but were now suddenly account directors that were like, oh, you were so nice to me then, so that's why we wanted to donate things to you. I had people that I'd gone to school with who suddenly came out of the woodwork and were collecting up and organising bags and getting their kids at high school to make bags for us. Like somebody got in touch with me and she's like, oh, school, all the vulnerable kids that were in, she was like, we'll make up bags. They made up 750 bags and sent them to our local hospital. You know, it was so lovely to do that and be in that position to do it. And, you know, it used a lot of skills that I didn't realise were so transferable.
Yeah.
That sort of logistical, you know, working things like that out. It wasn't an understanding what those products meant for everyone. You know, I'd go around the warehouse, I'd be like, they need a hair mask, they need a lipstick, they need a bronzer.
It almost sounds like, you know, with the whole thing, I can imagine you now at camp and stuff. Yeah.
They need everything. No, we need a lip balm. No, a multi-balm is a different thing. Don't worry about it. Like those bags, every single one of them was curated with my beauty editor background so that person had escapism for half an hour, right?
Yeah.
And also had that feeling of gratitude. That was very important to me, that people felt like somebody was noticing that they were doing work. That's why I made sure that whoever got in touch with me could have one. So because you don't have to be a top surgeon to deserve a goodie bag. You know, the cleaners were working just as hard. The porters, you know, people like that, the GP receptionists, you know, they were working really hard during the pandemic. So, you know, that's why it was really important for me to get it so big.
So the pandemic is, it's not finished, but, you know, our industry's opened up and you're doing so many different collaborations and stuff. So what changes? I mean, I feel like everything's moving so fast. Yeah. And, you know, I see that
everything changed.
I mean,
you know,
better, worse? How are you dealing with, like, work-wise?
Work-wise, my world completely changed, but I think it was more that I changed. I valued a work-home balance in a different way. I valued my personal mental well-being in a different way, which I look back now and I hadn't placed any value on that. I was sort of the smoke. I was also taken in with the smoke and mirrors, which, you know, so I was taken in. I mean, there was one incident, so it always comes back to me, where a brand had like flown me somewhere. I'd interviewed a really massive global celebrity. I'd been flown back, and then I got back to my studio, because at the time I lived in a studio, and I sat and had McDonald's on the floor in my studio, and I was like, at the time it was kind of glamorous, and now I look at it and go, that there was no real glamour there. Right. There was the juxtaposition of my life and my work life was massive, and I put more emphasis on my work life than I did on my life, and I think that showed in lots of different ways in how my social activities, in my hobbies. There was so much pressure on making sure I reached the top of that career tree that I didn't get to enjoy the journey in the same way that I do now. Like now when I do something, I enjoy it. I love it. I spend time on it. But believe me, if I'm busy or it's my family time or it's the weekend, I'm not doing it, right? Yeah. I never had that before, ever.
I mean, I'm not being funny, but you do always look happier. There's always a sparkle in your eyes, even though there's other problems, but it feels like you have, as long as I've known you, it feels like you have control over to say yes, no, thank you. And, you know, it's like, it's okay because you know your worth.
Totally.
You know, that something else is going to come.
Totally. And I think one of the main things that I realised I wanted to achieve after doing the charity did so much for me. Personally, it did a million things for me. But what it really did is it made me reflect afterwards, and it made me think of what I valued. And now the greatest thing I value is that I have a clear mind. As in, my mind doesn't rush around. I don't have a million other things that I can think of. If I want to sit down and do some meditation, I can just go. My mind's quiet. And that might not sound like something that should have a really high value, but it has had the highest value on my life, because I can now take that into every area, you know, whether that's family, personal, work. When you've got a quiet mind, you can approach things in a completely different way. And I also realised, I was like, I wasn't grateful of any of those opportunities. I don't even remember enjoying them, right? Because it was so flippant, you know, I'm going to Beyonce this week in the Beyonce stage, and then I'm being flown to New York for Fashion Week, and then I'm shooting in Bermuda. I mean, I don't even remember enjoying it. I look back now, I think, Jesus Christ, what I did. I looked through my photos between January and March 2013. I'd done more in those 3 months than I'd done for the last 4 years. Do I remember them? Do I appreciate them? Had I even taken a picture of them? No, I hadn't, right? Because I was far too busy thinking about the next thing, right? What we're doing next.
Yeah.
So I decided that for me personally, I was going to think about now. I don't worry if the job is going to be there or the contract or this. I don't worry about that. And actually what I do is when I go to brands now, I explain these type of things to them, because I think for years brands have been so obsessed with what's happening in Q1 in 2024, right? Well, hang on, we're in 2022 in Q3 or whatever. I don't really know the Qs, but like, should we worry about now? Because now is slightly different, because I always talk about this, but we talked about Brexit and what could happen if Brexit happened. For how many years? Years we talked about it. No one factored in if a pandemic would come along, did they? Right? So no one factored that factor in when they were doing all their mathematical things, because the fact is you can pretend you know what's coming in the future, but you don't.
You don't.
You don't.
Yeah.
And when you unlock that, you've unlocked the key to life. So you worry about the job you're doing today. Right? Yeah. How many times did we do it where you think, I can't work for that magazine because that magazine then won't book me? You know, back in the day.
I never did that. I went in for the kill of everyone. Anyone who tried to book me was first come, first served, and I even turned down.
You were very unusual. You were the first person, actually, I have to be honest, that used their real name with me, because Fabulous. No, honestly, Fabulous was, it was a tabloid. And nobody used their real name apart from you. So I suppose at the time I didn't realise there was of that mutual respect. But obviously, look at our relationship now.
Yeah.
That respect that you showed me and the publication at the time has continued. Whereas, they didn't know any better, because that's what they were told. Or don't do work with Lauren, because then you'll never shoot for Elle or you'll never shoot for Vogue. I could tell you some ridiculous stories of the lengths people have gone to shoot their sort of commercial work and then shoot their high editorial work. I mean, it's outrageous.
Yeah, I remember you telling me some stories where I just couldn't believe my ears.
I can't disclose
You can't disclose, I know. But it's just really interesting that, you say that I was the only one. Yeah. And I'm just like, oh, no, maybe I did something wrong. But you know what? I could die tomorrow and I'd still be happy. I didn't let you down. Exactly. Because I did your shoot and I helped you.
But we've had this obsession, haven't we, with the journey, with the end result. Hang on a second, there's all these other days, right? And I think once you get that, and I think, that is something, especially that I speak to brands, you get it now.
So if you're telling the brands, because obviously you value the artist and the power of the makeup. Yeah. So what are you... what is your advice, or what does it mean to you, like when you're telling brands about it? Because you're always advocating good makeup artists.
Oh, always. Yeah. I mean, I think that, it's the same with like trends come and go, but talent doesn't talent doesn't. And I think that that's really important. And I think that journey is what I'm talking about, where if you're going up on what you're trying to guess what a trend's going to be, or if you're going to guess who's going to be hot and who's not, and going after somebody who's hot at that time and then dropping them, you'll never build a relationship with somebody. You'll never build an understanding, and you'll never be authentic. And at the end of the day, all people want is authenticity. I don't care whether that is from their food company, their clothing, that they want it to be authentic. And as a brand, if you continuously follow a trend rather than working with skilled workers who are talented, who have assisted, who have gone through the journey, who have done, the whole shebang, you're only ever going to be superficial. You're only going to have superficial success. So that's what I say to people, actually. I say, would you want superficial success? Do you want a quick cash? Or do you want to be here for the long term? Because there's two different routes. There's the quick cash route. There's a very successful, tried and tested formula. Throw a lot of money at it, you'll make a lot of money back. Or do you build and use talent, use creativity, build up your customer, build them in, bring them in so that they stay loyal to you. Two different routes. I'm not going to tell you which is the right one.
I was going to say, which one should we do?
Look, I'm not money driven, so I'll always go for one. But you know what? I'm not
saying no to money.
I'm not Kim Kardashian, who does. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. She goes after that big cat. But you watch them, when something doesn't work, they ditch it, right? They go after a trend, and then when something doesn't work, they go. This is clever money people. I'm just not that person. Interesting.
Although, my mind is just going round. So that's, I guess, your power is basically doing it now, taking action.
Well, just worrying about now, being present. I think being present is really important, and that is actually what for me, that's what makeup and skincare and the beauty industry does. It makes you present. You go for a hair appointment, you get your hair cut. On that day, you feel amazing. When I was going through, some personal struggles, I got up every morning and I did my skincare routine and I put my makeup on. Not a heavy face of makeup, but just something. And you know what? That grounded me. It set me up for the day and it grounded me. Now, don't tell me that's frivolous and unimportant. It's so important. And it wasn't about hiding. It wasn't about transforming myself. It was about how my relationship with beauty and how positive that was. It has been a constant for me throughout my, pre-teen onwards. It's been a constant. Like makeup doesn't hurt you. It doesn't cheat on you. It doesn't lie to you. It's, it's just something that can bring some joy to you. And take that moment, I think there's a massive connection with actually physically touching yourself, actually physically looking at yourself in the mirror. I think that, whether you're having your makeup done, it's the same thing. It's being forced to sort of look at your own reflection and take it in and take that moment. And I think it's really important. I think as humans, we need that physical touch, whether that's from ourselves or other people, just to connect us.
Of course, because if you look at the pandemic, we lost so many people for a lot of reasons. And I feel like I still lost a lot of people because they're still very introvert.
Totally.
And not going to, whereas my mindset was like, oh, okay, what can we do now? And, that's when I went and did all my other bits and tried to keep on working. Loads of people into TV and stuff. But those that couldn't do anything, I've just moved completely out of the industry. And it's such a shame. I've lost so many beautiful souls.
It's really hard. Really hard. And I think, that was the one thing that was my massive take home. Like the people that came and helped me during the pandemic, so many of them said, oh my God, this has saved me. It saved me. It's kept my sanity. And I genuinely feel the same way. It kept my sanity. Every time I won sort of an award or any accolade for it, I felt embarrassed because I felt I got way more than they did. And I also noticed that the fear left those people because they'd stepped outside of their house. Because I think when we stay in, we become sort of very isolated, obviously, but we we're our own worst enemies. We believe that our thoughts are true, you know, and if you're in a negative space, your thoughts are negative. And when you're not hearing other voices, it's really hard. But the minute you step out and you interact and you work with people, it's so much better. And I definitely learned that, you know, no man's an island. You know, we all work better when we are together. You know, that's my best thing that's come out of the pandemic, I think. I mean, look at even the podcast.
Yeah.
Would this have happened without a pandemic? Maybe not.
Because
would you have had all of the same people that you connected with do you know what I mean? You connected with all these people, didn't you?
I did, yeah. Yeah. Where would you like to see the industry go?
I think I'd like to see the industry lose what we were talking about before, where that sort of like the fakeness, the hierarchy. Let's promote talent. Let's promote people, whether they're, you know, I think an assistant is just as important as a director. You know, I think that the same with makeup artists. Like, I think, you know, that's where I'd like to see that's where we can go. I think because the ground has been a bit leveling the last few years. You know, people have, you know, they just have had to almost start from point zero. Obviously, some people have more of an advantage than others, but I'd like to see that continue. And obviously the flexibility, I think it's really important, particularly in a female-heavy industry. Yeah.
Especially with family, because I do remember the first time when I was pregnant, everyone was like, you're pregnant, more work for us, you're going to be gone. And I was like, what? And I remember having my baby, and then you're like, bring your baby. And I was like, what? And I brought our nanny, which is
she pooed on me.
She pooed on you, yes, she pooed on you.
And I was a pooing baby on me.
And I was absolutely mortified. And you're like, it's okay, babies love me. And I'm like, oh my God, but she just pooed on the beauty editor. I'm like, but you know, and you were so calm and
we all do it.
And it mean, come on. You know, it just took the pressure off me. And, you know, it was a switch because I was like, okay. You know, it wasn't so bad bringing the baby, because I panicked because when she's pooing, changing. I mean, I remember going into my head and being so embarrassed and going, and in my head I was effing and blinding, but actually I felt like
has to come from us.
Yeah,
that's what I've always. Yeah. That's to be honest, that's been really important for me in the industry. We cannot talk about empowering women without empowering women. And I had a big problem with a lot of the magazines for that exact reason. You know, I felt like we talk about empowering women, we talk about flexibility, yet we're not offering it. Okay, This is a problem. This doesn't work, or we don't pay the women as much as we pay the men. What? Sorry, we're running campaigns and we're not paying them. This makes no sense. Yeah. So you know what we're saying. And that's one thing. And words.
Yeah, and you were one of these people that whenever you said, right, there's big budgets, you're like, what? You know, like you were always advocating, no, if I can get you, I'm going to get it for you. It wasn't like, just because you were a magazine or whatever. You know, you were always there, left, right and centre, always pulling it together and putting the value on makeup.
Exactly, and the value should be done on skills.
Yeah.
Right? And you know, and on the other side as well, like, you know, there's a lot of pressure for, you know, what do they say, for a woman to work like she doesn't have a child and to be a parent and to be a mother as if she doesn't work. Right, and that is so true. You know, we are expected to do it all and not, and not sacrifice the other. It's impossible. It's impossible. And a lot of us learned that during the pandemic, where we had no childcare, where we didn't have access to family. You cannot have it all, right? Yeah. So I think I would hope for the industry that we are leaders in that. I would like to see the beauty industry be the leaders that flexible working environment, in being able to work a couple of days a week and that not be seen as a failure or not be seen as part-time, being seen as, you know, valuing your mental well-being, valuing your work-life balance and still being kick-ass successful. Yeah. Right? So, you know, that's where I would hope that the industry can go from here.
Well, I hope so too. Right, Lauren, thank you so much for your insight.
Thank you for having
it was
me.
just lovely just putting you on the chair instead of you interviewing me. So it's been a pleasure, and I look forward to seeing what you achieve next.
Thank you. And you know I'm your biggest fan.
Oh, you're so cute.